Hey, comrades, what's up? I hope everyone's doing great. I've got this like weird cough, but we're gonna persevere or something. Anyway, the next book on my list of things that I force myself to finish, God damn, is called Constellations. Now, Constellations is on my little batch of light novels that I downloaded. And it is not a Japanese light novel. It is, in fact, some sort of American web novel thing, which is, I guess, is starting to become a thing after being in Japan and Korea for a while. And China, too, I think. So what's a web novel? Web novels are these, like, weekly or bi-weekly stories. Like, each week or 2 weeks is, like, a chapter or an episode or something. The most famous one right now is Solo Leveling that I'm aware of, which just won, like, Anime of the Year by Crunchyroll and has, like, a lot of big following. I read all of them there. You can find them here somewhere. But they start off as web novels, and then he edited them down into 8 light novels, and then they got an anime and whatnot. So this is not that. In fact, it's very romantic-y, but not in like, without all like the sexual romance stuff you get from like a Harlequin romance novel, and also without a story that makes any sense. And then the story just kind of like ends in the audiobook that I was listening to. And then I was like, that's interesting. And so when I did some research, because I was like, it's like literally is like, I opened the door and there were my friends. And that was the end of the audiobook. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. There's like, that's not an ending at all. And so I found the web novel, and then I read like the last like 3 chapters or episodes or the fucking column in this, 3 or 4. And then it kind of has like an ending, but that was like in 2001 or 2, and that is the end of the web novel. I think it was 2001, in fact, which is like 4 years ago. And so much like many erotic visual novels that I play, this story was abandoned to never be seen again. I don't know how it became an audiobook, but it's there, and you can get it if you really want. I would not recommend that, but we're going to talk about it anyway. All right, so Constellations. It starts off with a girl named Eris. She's being taken to like an academy for astrals. We get no explanation in this first like episode / chapter. It's actually not a bad way to like start a story. It doesn't hold up throughout the rest of the time. At some point, you can tell this person just kind of like ran out of steam, and they're just kind of like doing it because I guess they were getting a Patreon check for it or something, much like a lot of erotic visual novels that I play. Anyway, those born with powers based on astrals are people born with powers based on constellations. She's very nervous. There is this charming older guy than her, like a guy she's supposed to be like 18, 19, and this guy is like in his 30s, so could like maybe 40s. Like I think it gets brought up that he's in his 30s, so like 10, 15 years older. Anyway, they arrive, and then she hints at some secret she's keeping. They then test her for water and fire elemental abilities, and she passes. We then go back in time. Eris is thinking back into like her previous university or school she went to, which is like Duluth or something. She mentions that she was born an orphan, and I mean, no one's born an orphan, but she was, that's what she says, that she became an orphan quickly after being born, and how she went to the school because she got tired of the foster care system, and she just wanted to go check it out. She then checks in with the school. She remembers checking into the school and heading to her apartment, and then as she's walking, this crazy guy tries to assault with her sword, and at that point she summons a guy. Then he summons a guy in the wind to kill her. Right as she's about to be struck, she summons like a shadow snake creature. The boy then goes off about some older bullshit or something, darkness or whatever. Then the guy, okay, hold on. No, she summons, goddamn. She summons like a guy. No. He summons okay, he's about to strike her with wind. Yeah, I got confused here. All right. And then, okay, so then she summons the snake, and then he summons Orion to fight her, like Orion, like the constellation, right? That's the name of the book, Constellations. He destroys the snakes and then comes after Eris. And again, right as she's about to be struck down, she then summons Ophiuchus, who grabs Orion's sword. She then feels like she can use magic and shoots the guy with a fireball, and then dumps like the whole alleyway into like fire. The guy tries to put it out with wind, and then she turns all the fire blue. And then she also senses that she has some control over water at this time, just because, why not? So she tries to put the fire out, and at that point, a giant lion jumps between the two of them, and this man showed up, and he chides the boy. The boy's name is Castor, and then the man introduces himself as Leander, and he talks to Eris and says like, oh, hey, we're astrals, and so are you. And also you have some dark powers, but that's okay. Because usually people with dark powers, we find out they go crazy and just do all sorts of crazy stuff. So they have to do something about them before they're too late, as in they have to kill them. That's why this guy attacked her. Anyway, so Leander invites her to come with them, which is where the book starts. All right, so fun. So then later on, after the first episode, we pick up where the school starts. She meets Nike, or Nike, I think it's Nike. Hey, Nike, who's her teacher, along with Poppy, who's this pink-haired chick, because of course. Poppy is like a water bender, whatever, so they go to practice because her fire is strong, but she has no control over it. And then Poppy's like very delicate with her water, but she has no strength behind it. So then after they do like some sort of test with Nike, they have to like continue with extra credit homework to figure out how to grow their powers better. Eris continues to fail at doing what they call the detail work, and Leander approaches her and challenges her to go for a run. She used to run track, so she's like, hell yeah, let's do it. And then they do that, and then they go to like the gym, and he gives her a staff to practice with as a weapon, and she keeps like eyeballing these daggers. And on the cover of the book, we see I can only assume is Eris with daggers. And so don't worry, folks, those daggers don't come up almost ever. And then we see this guy who I assume is supposed to be Castor on the cover of this book with a bow and arrow, which no one in this book ever uses a bow and arrow, ever, including Orion, the great hunter. Okay. So anyway, so back to the story. Leander and her practice with the staffs. He beats the shit out of her. And then he calls Castor over to fight with her. They work out. At some point, Poppy comes in so they can do some more magic work together. And then Eris almost blasts Poppy, but Castor saves her. Then Eris realizes that he's kind of like stalking her and stuff because he thinks she's dangerous. Obviously, he's the one who came to like kill her. A little bit later in time, they get introduced to phantoms. Phantoms are like humans, but different. In fact, they're like ghosts, so they're more ghosts than human. And then they get like, here, we have a phantom right here. Look at that. And the phantom is watching Eris very closely. And then they start talking about where the heart's at, because the heart, you have. So I sighed because I just remembered this part of the book. So the book spends a whole lot of time right here in this section talking about how phantoms are like dark creatures, and they come from like the emotions of human beings who've like passed on. They're ghosts. They're fucking ghosts. So these fucking ghosts, the phantoms, which is another term for ghost, right? So they're like these creatures, and they exist because like human hearts were filled with emotion of some sort when they died, and it left like these phantoms behind. And part of like the astral's job is to like hunt phantoms down. But phantoms are like really tough because you have to figure out where their heart is, and their heart's not just like in their heart. It's like what they held closest in their heart. Get it? So part of defeating phantoms is they have to figure out the heart. And if you don't know where the heart is, you can't actually destroy it. Don't worry. That's not really important to know. Even though I spent a long time talking about it, the book spends way more time talking about it. And about halfway through the book, it doesn't fucking matter at all. Like the whole heart thing just gets like completely dropped. So, okay, good to know. So anyway, Nike tells them like sad story about the guy. He was like, he went home and the house was on fire. And so he ran inside to try to rescue his family fire, and they all died. And so because there was a tragedy, that's where the phantoms were born. So where's his heart? Where do you guys think his heart is at? So Eris figures out that it's in like the stuffed rabbit that he's holding, the phantom's holding, that was like part of like his daughter's. And then Nike is like, that's correct. And then the phantom breaks out and knocks Nike out. And then the thing starts fighting. So Eris and Castor go to fight the phantom while Poppy uses her magic along with some Nilo guy. Castor eventually gets like beat up or knocked away by the phantom, and then eventually, after some getting beat the shit out of and having a real struggle, they eventually combine their forces and are able to like destroy the heart. And then they fight, and then everyone, like the teachers come in and like, surprise, it was just a test, you guys were fine, there was no danger here whatsoever, you all passed. And so there's like a whole class of like 30 kids, and the four of them, Nilo, Castor, Eris, and Poppy, are the only ones who pass because they're the only ones who like fought to find the heart or something. And so they all get ranked up. And I was like, well, that was quick. Like, how long have they been in this fucking school? And so then they have like a whole graduation ceremony and everything. Like, it's not just like, oh, good job, move on to the next class. It's like, congratulations, you're valued. The rest of you are shit and need remedial training. And I was like, damn, this is like some hard truths here in the astral land. Like, they literally learned about this heart thing, and like 5 seconds later, it was like, you have to figure it out or you're all gonna die. And then if you run away, then you need remedial training. And it's like, how about you teach your students better? And the funniest part all is they have this whole thing later where it's like, oh, there's not enough astrals, and like, we're having a hard time keeping up with all like the dark magic users and the phantoms. And it's like, well, maybe if you trained people better instead of just like surprising them and hoping like everything works out well, you dumbasses. Like, what a bunch of dumb fucking assholes. Anyway, so at that point, they all have to go to the infirmary for an examination. Then they go to the commissary, which is just a fucking cafeteria. I don't know why you called it a commissary. Like, a commissary is a place where you buy goods. It's not a place where you eat them. Goddamn book. Oh, God. So then Eris spends more time training with Leander. They talk about a missing group of finders. So finders are people who are not astrals, but they're like associated with the astrals, because like even if your parents are astrals, you may not be born with astral powers, and even if your parents are not astrals, you may be born with astral power, maybe. And so the finders are like people who are pulled into like the astral society but don't have powers, right? Because this is like cribbing off Harry Potter pretty hardcore. And so they get sent out to like look around for phantoms, and what we find out later is called dark stars, which are like evil astrals essentially, who have shadow powers, which if you like look back to earlier on in the book, like her shadow snake is like very ominous, right? Anyway, so there's a group of finders that is missing. Let's see. And so that's important to know. So then they start their new class, and immediately Nikke comes in to teach them. And it's like, hey, what are you doing here? I thought you were teaching the first level class. And she's like, oh, those guys can go fuck themselves. If they didn't graduate, if they didn't graduate from that like surprise attack we threw in there, they're getting remedial training. I don't have anything to do with that bullshit. And so then we get like the official word on dark stars. The regular people who are born under a dark star instead of like a constellation. Some are fine, some awaken, and if they awaken, they enter like a demon-like state called a supernova, which they just like destroy everything. And then after the supernova, they turn into like a null void, which is a huge area. It's like a black fucking hole, and it can destroy like whole countries and stuff. There is no uniformity to how dark stars manifest their powers, and you have to be beware of the constellation of Ophiuchus. Ruh-roh, that's the guy that Eris is associated with. That's Eris' constellation, Lord. So she's freaking out, obviously. Nikke mentions that Ophiuchus always comes before catastrophes. Wah, wah, wah. Later on, Eris is pissed. Ophiuchus is such a sweet boy. How dare they be so mean to him? And then we learn more about the difference between astrals and the dark stars. Astrals have a choice to be good or bad, so you can have bad astrals. Never comes up again. There are no bad astrals. And the dark stars always lead to corruption. All right, cool. Time for duels. So Eris and Castor fight again, and then we learn that like one of the 12 who are the best of the astrals. We learned about the 12. And the astrals are, or not the astrals, the 12. The 12 are like the 12 constellations, like the 12 zodiac signs or something. And so Leander is like Leon. That's why he can summon a lion, right? Or Leo or whatever. And then there's like Apollo and some other lady or whatever. Oh, there it is, Apollo. So the reason we learned about this is because Apollo comes walking in the gym, and Eris is very unsettled by his presence because Apollo is an asshole, like a super asshole. All right, cool. So remember that. And then so Leander takes Eris on a trip to get ice cream. Because I'm like, yeah, brother, get that 18-year-old puss. Do it. So she finally reveals that she is upset about the whole Ophiuchus thing, and he's like, don't worry about it. So then they go back and duel some more. We find out that Leander is a firebender, and then he also teaches her about Castor's weakness, is that he's very uncreative, and that never really comes up again. But it does right now because she duels Castor and finally wins because he's uncreative, and then it never comes up again. Then they get their own like phantom mission. So all four of them together are going to go fight like a low-level phantom that the finders found, and Leander is going to go and watch like Seinfeld in his car on his phone while they do that, and then come in if it's like really super important. Probably. So they arrive at some old nondescript industrial building. They found out that like 2 people killed themselves there, and they like don't really know why that is, but that's the phantom looking for. So they head in. Like I said, Leander's like watching Seinfeld on his phone, and then almost immediately upon entering, Poppy and Eris stumble into some like rotted flooring and fall down. So then they find themselves kind of like all in the basement area with like covered in dirt and stuff. and Nilo and Castor are nowhere to be seen. And Poppy mentions that Nilo cast some sort of like protection magic. He's like an earthbender to protect them all from the thing or whatever. So then they find a weird mural, and it's got these like 2 dead bodies on it, and there's an altar, and then they find the phantom, and it looks like 2 people holding hands, but they're all fucking jacked up like phantoms tend to be. They're like, we're not gonna fight this thing. We're like all beat up, and we need like the whole crew. So they go find like a hole to escape through, and then they're able to distract that phantom and get away. They crash down some more the roof, or they crash some of the roof down on the head of the phantom while it's trying to climb through the hole. And then they find Castor's sword, and it's covered in blood and shit. And they're like, oh shit. So they try to dig him out, but there's a lot of blood, and he's probably dead. So they take his sword, and they head down a passageway, which leads them to like another floor. There are more mosaics down here. So a lot more mosaics about, it shows like the astrals and the dark stars like working together, and then there's like the couple holding hands and like an altar and stuff. And then the constellations are all around, and the murals are telling some sort of story. And they see that there's 13. There's the 13, not the 12, right? So that it's not just the 12. There's 13. Don't worry, none of this stuff ever comes up again, really. So they find an atrium, and it's not just one phantom. There's several phantoms moving around, and they're all people holding hands. Oh Lord, what's going on here? So then Eris decides to use her shadow powers to grab onto the phantoms and hold them so they can escape. Poppy summons her constellation, which is Hydra, and then they are able to like search around looking for Nilo. And they find him, and there's a phantom attacking him. And then someone hits the phantom from like behind with a spear, and it's at Castor, of course. Who else the fuck would it be? So then the phantoms are fighting hard, and then 2 more of the phantoms roll in, and Eris stops them with like a firewall. And so they're finally getting the first phantom down, and the other 2 start pushing themselves through the fire. And they end up tossing the first one at the other 2 while Nilo puts up like an earthbending wall. Eris asks about the sat phone, and Nilo's like, it's broken, here you go. And Castor's like super upset about not being able to kill the phantoms, but they have to kill these 3 to get out, and then come back with Leander to get the others, because there's like a whole fucking bunch of them. So they're talking about the murals, and like Castor and Nilo saw them too, and it's like, what's going on with that? And it's like, don't worry, it never comes up again in the story ever again. So then So then they look at the murals, and they're talking about like, well, there's rings on their hand and there's like ribbons, so maybe the hearts are in the hand. So if we destroy like the rings, we'll be good. So then Nilo summons his constellation, which is like some really big lady, and they release the phantoms. And Nilo's constellation seals them up, and Eris and Castor attack, and they fight and they fight and they fight, and eventually they cut the ring. But whoa, that's not the heart. So they get beat up a little bit, and then Eris figures out that it's the ribbon, maybe, and they can't find the ribbon, so they just like do a fire tornado. So they fire tornado the phantom to death. So finding that heart, really not that important. In fact, they just fire tornado this guy to death, and it becomes destroyed. At this point, Nilo is like totally tapped out because summoning all these like creatures and magic, like it's like a real drain on the old system there. So there's 2 more phantoms. They're free from the earth cages. So then at this point, I don't know what Poppy's doing at this point. I think she got hit or something. I can't remember. I didn't write it down. So Eris and Castor, then they summon their constellations, and then they hold up the phantoms so they can get another fire tornado going. They kill one of them. But then Castor's like totally tapped the fuck out, which leaves one phantom charging at Castor. Eris uses the power of her water bending to attack and protect Castor, because her fire magic's like tapped out, and that never really gets explained. Why she can like, I guess her mana pool's open, but like all her castings, her like whatever you're calling Dungeons and Dragons, like she's cast all the fire spells for the day, but she still has some water spells she can cast because they're not using like a mana system in this world. So she fights and fights, and then she gets cast her sword and fights, and then she passes out, and this phantom's about to kill her and all her friends, and right as she's passing out, she sees gold. She wakes up later, and she's in the back of Leander's car, and Leander was like, I haven't heard anything from these guys for a while, I better go check it out. So he went in there and like killed all the phantoms without any problems whatsoever. Yep, he just went and did it. He didn't need to figure out shit all about the ribbons or nothing. So he's super proud of the kids. They killed off a lot of phantoms. Then he's like, man, you guys shouldn't have been sent here. The finder's like really fucked up. There should have been like one phantom you guys could have easily taken out. Like this was way fucked up. So now Eris starts thinking about being an orphan, and then talks to him about the murals. Later in the clinic at the school, Poppy wakes up. They chit chat for a bit. Then Leander comes to visit. It takes about another day for them all to recover. And Leander takes him out to celebrate because he's super excited, and takes him to like this old beat down shack, and inside is like the seafood feast, and everyone's like, damn, this is really good. Then they find they're all be giving like a little vacation, and then Aster mentions Castor's parents, and everyone gets like super quiet, and then Castor like storms off because he's an asshole. And then they're like, after he leaves, Leander goes after him, and Nilo and Poppy are like, you don't know about Castor's parents? And she's like, I don't know shit all about anything, man. I've been living on the streets like my whole god. I was in foster care until like 10 minutes ago. And we find out that his parents were legends. They were like the biggest Death Star capturers of all time. And that one day they were just found strung up in the school atrium. And that was years ago, and it was like super tragic. And the person who found them was Castor. Oh no. Then Nilo drops like the bomb that he's thinking about leaving the school like his older brother did. And that he doesn't want to deal with these phantoms no more because they're a bunch of assholes, and it's like, you know, not fun. So they discuss this. Poppy's having a real hard time because she clearly has feelings towards Nilo, it seems. And then Eris is like, I support you. And then she's like, I'm going to go for a walk. So she sees Castor and Leander like arguing about something. And she overhears them. Castor's super mad. Leander killed the Dark Star that killed... we found out that Leander is someone who killed the Dark Star that killed Castor's parents. And he's mad about that, it seemed, but I don't know. And then he notices Eris is there, and so Castor storms off. The next morning, she goes over to apologize to him at the gym, and he's like, I don't care. And then he storms off anyway because he does care. And then Poppy and Nilo head out for like their homes because they get like a vacation because they've graduated like twice now or whatever, which leaves Eris all alone. And at some point, she gets accosted by Nike. Because Nilo and Poppy are back. So that was like a quick, short little vacation there. So it's around here that we finally like learn about finders instead of just hearing the name. I already explained pretty much what they are. They're just like family members with no powers. Anyway, Nike takes them down into the school's depths where the finders like live in like the sub-basement of the sub-basement of like the astral school. Once they get down there, Nike asks for Valden, who's their leader, and they talk about the mission they just went on and how it's a failure of the finders. They also meet Kelly, who seems important but is not, because she's got like a real sass mouth hair. Like there's like a lot of time spent with her in like this episode, and the next episode is what they call them in this fucking thing instead of just chapters. There's a lot of confusion about what words mean from this author. I feel. Okay, whatever. And then later on at the commissary, God, she sees Kelly and like some of her finder homies, and so she goes to sit down with them, and then Eris is like, can we be friends? And Kelly's like, I'm an asshole, so no. And Kelly's like, and Eris is like, please. And then, all right, you dumb bitch, that's fine. So then they talk, and then she learns about there's been an increase of deaths in like astrals and finders and stuff. And so that there might be like a rogue Dark Star. That's what they say, even though like all Dark Stars are technically rogues from how they were described earlier and later on in this book. So I don't know why the term rogue was used. Clearly someone needs an editor. But anyway, Kelly doesn't believe it. We learned that Kelly had reported on the tunnels that Eris and her friends were in, and that Kelly says there's like an insider causing problems because in her report she mentioned that it was too dangerous for people to go in there and that there were probably multiple phantoms, but then the report got edited before it got passed off to like the rest of the school, and it did not include that. We do not get much more information about that. In fact, it's not brought up like ever again, but later on when we learn who's like the person who sent Castor to kill her in the first place and all that, which is super obvious because we've already met them. It's like so goddamn obvious. I figured it out in like the first 1/10 of the book. We like, oh, that person is an insider and he was doing all this bullshit and he's an asshole, like a super asshole. Anyway, so it's midterm time. Also more missions. The midterm is a presentation of their abilities in front of like 3 members of the 12 and stuff. And so she reaches out to Leander to talk about it, and he's like, I promise to support you. So there's some dueling. Afterwards, he gives her a new staff instead of like a real weapon, and this time it's fireproof. That's cool. He also gives her some gunpowder because fire and gunpowder, right? So she can use that to like, you know, it's a way to like make her powers better, which is not a bad idea, whatever. They then see Apollo saying something to Castor as they're leaving. And Apollo, again, is definitely the guy who ordered Castor to kill him, and he's also the asshole who changed the crap, and he's just a dumb bitch. Anyway, so it's midterm time. Castor goes first, then Eris. They're being graded by Leander, Apollo, and some old lady, I can't remember her name, the one from the graduation ceremony that I didn't really talk about. Yep, there. Like I said, there was a full blown-out graduation ceremony with one of the 12. And before the first trial begins, Apollo brings up her candidacy about her constellation not being, because they keep saying it's like Hercules, and that's a lie. And then something about not being able to summon her constellation, which means she needs to be removed from the academy immediately. She freaks out, of course. But Leander and Apollo will both argue because Leander mentions that he struggled to summon for a long time and that there was a mysterious reason that we never find out. Then the old lady silences them and starts the trial. And so we have like a sumo. They essentially do sumo wrestling with bending powers. So stay in the circle, drive the other person out. She knocks this guy out, but like lands on him as well. But she gets considered it's considered a loss for her because her arm touched outside the ring first as she was like blasting them out or whatever. Later on, she's talking to Poppy and Nilo and Castor. So Poppy seems very sullen and Nilo's also super pissed about the whole situation. Castor's the only one who seems to not give any fucks about what's going on. And then Nikke's just like chilling in class. So finally, she's like, all right, I got the test results. Come here. Castor asks Eris, you passed. You move on you graduated again. Even though you've been here less than like 2 months, you've like moved on twice and like left all these fucking astral candidates behind. And now your 2 friends are also left behind because of reasons. So Poppy and Nilo now have their mediation, which is, I don't know, they just burn them at the stake. Like, it's so ridiculous. So then Eris gets like a certificate of like achievement. It's worth 5 promotion points. And an evaluation, they said that she's creative and quick thinking, but impulsive, and that she needs to learn how to summon her constellation. And then she's like, I wonder who said that, Apollo. Wah, wah. Shut up, dumb bitch. So she gets moved to a squad, so she's not going to work with Castor, Poppy, or Nilo anymore, except her squad is literally Castor. Of course it is. And Leander. Now that the team is all set up with Leander, Castor, and Eris, it's time to show Leander what they can do. So they show him the little fire tornado thing they use to completely ignore the weak spot problem with the phantoms. Then Veldon and Kelly show up, the finders, right? So they brief a new mission. There's some finders have disappeared in a small ghost town. And they say, likely it's just human interference. We want you to go check it out. A little bit later on, Poppy and Nilo come to hang out. They all talk about this mission, and then they head out. It's 3 days of driving, and Eris mentions that it feels like a vacation or anything else until they get to the ghost town, and they start searching around, and that's when they fall into the trap because shadow powers come out. Leander tells them to support him while he fights this Dark Star. The enemy is some lady. She strikes at Leander, pushing him back. Eris notices the shadows expanding, then Castor gets absorbed, and then Eris gets absorbed. She uses her own shadow powers to escape this little shadow realm the Dark Star was created. Then she runs into this like shadow chick. They sort of fight, but Eris gets caught up in it. This chick identifies herself as Set, like the Egyptian goddess, right? She starts going all supernova or whatever. Starts thwarting Eris around. She's gonna kill her like real good. And then Leander shows up with the lion constellation Leo, knocks her back, frees Ares from the shadow, and he sends her down this elevator while him and Set keep fighting. Eris finds Castor on the next floor. I guess that's where he got shadowed off to. And she like resuscitates him, and then they barely escape back to the elevator before shadow powers come and get them both. So we get more of Set being an asshole, and the Astral struggling to fight her and stuff. And then she gives Leander an ultimatum. She has like Eris and Castor like tied up against the wall, and then the Finders on like the other wall. And she's like, you can sacrifice the Finders or the Astrals. Ooh, hoo, 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 hoo. So finally, Leander combines forces with the children and is able to punch her through the chest, killing her. That being said, a bunch of the Finders are dead. They get in the car to head back. Eris has a complete breakdown about her shadow powers and what Set said about... because Set made some comment about her like being a shadow creature too, just being just like, you're just like me, ooh, hoo, 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 and all that. So she's having like a real tough go with all that. Leander keeps telling her that she's different and she's special because she's the protagonist of this story. But she's got like strong hold F to doubt kind of energy going on. Upon their return, there's a celebration. Poppy hugs her, but Eris is sad and locks herself into her room. She's getting like real mopey and thinking like the best thing she can do for her friends is like leave them alone and not let them be connected to her like void magic when it finally like destroys everything around her because she goes crazy. Then go talk to that old lady who like was at their graduation and their midterm. Tell her like the whole report. Eris then decides she's going to avoid Poppy and just go train at the gym because she doesn't want to get Poppy. She doesn't want to hurt Poppy by like transforming into like her Dark Star self at any point. A little bit later, she overhears Castor and Leander talking about Dark Stars generally. She continues to like completely avoid all her friends, which is mostly Nilo and Poppy. But she runs into Nikke, who's just doing gardening shit. She gets Eris to help her do that, and then we go back to the gym. Castor gives her time, but why she's avoiding Poppy, and then Poppy shows up. And she wants to know why Eris is being such a bitch. Eris tells him that they can't be friends anymore, and then Poppy runs off crying, of course. And then Castor says he's very disappointed. like he's her fucking dad and not the main love interest. Anyway, a bit later, training continues. Leander is being very cold about stuff, but Castor's being very professional. Castor is slowly improving. She practices using her water power bending on Castor, and at some point he takes his shirt off because she's so handsome and stuff, and she blushes about it. They get assigned another mission, and this time it's going to go hunt down some phantom, and the phantom has something to do with like cannibalism or something. So they head off to like these woods somewhere, and they wander around in the woods, and eventually Castor finds some blood, and they summon Leander with like a flare gun, and then they dig up this bloody backpack that belongs to like this girl that's gone missing or whatever. They continue to look around, but they don't really find anything for several days. They chit-chat at the hotel about the Phantom, what it could be, where it could be, what's going on. Then Eris figures out that the Phantom only comes out at night because of bats or something. She tells Castor she's only using that she's not using fire or shadow magic anymore. She's only going to use water because reasons. She's a teenage girl. They go out the next night, find a cave with a bunch of mounds, and these mounds are all like the missing people. And so, hold on. So missing people. Yep. So they split up and cover the most ground. They find the Phantom. Or she finds the Phantom. So she sets a flare off and then heads towards Castor. She finds out his flashlight is all smashed up and where Castor should be. Then she sees a flare. And then she sees another flare. She heads that way. Then she's attacked by the Phantom. She escapes and runs through the forest. The Phantom is somehow invisible, but does have a shadow so that she can fight it because she can see a shadow as long as there's light. So they fight. Then the moon comes out and she can seize it, and the Phantom like really hates the light for whatever reason. She does some trick with mud to make sure she pulls like a predator. So she throws like mud on it so she can see it, gets mud on herself as well. So they fight. She uses her staff with the gunpowder to like really blow the shit out of it. And then Castor calls out to her right before she like sets it off because dun dun dun, when you're in a forest and you light a giant explosive fire, that's going to set the whole forest on fire. But that's okay because it stops raining, which stops the fire. It's not that she caused it or anyone else caused the magic rain to come down and like stop the fire from going everywhere. But she does realize that she blew the shit out of Castor as well, so she goes and tracks him down. But hey, he's okay, and they still can't find Leander. And apparently all that explosions and whatnot did nothing to the Phantom because it's still ready to party. So Castor creates a cyclone to clear out the clouds and the rain, and the Phantom is super unhappy about that because now it's got light. And as you can remember, it hates light. So during this fight, Eris uses her shadow magic. Then Leo shows up with Leander, who slugs the shit out of the Phantom, killing it because he loves punching shit. He kind of reminds me of that character from Persona 3, the quiet guy whose like brother kills himself or whatever. You can see my review on that this week or last week, I think. Anyway, not a big fan. And then Leander apparently found the missing woman, the bloody backpack and everything, and ta-da, she's alive. Excellent. So then the woman chats with Eris because girl power and such, and she's shocked about the whole thing, the monsters and whatnot. And then heading back to the car, Leander is patching up Castor when Castor's grandfather calls. So Leander takes the ladies away so Castor can talk to his grandfather. It's like his only family member left, right? Because his parents were killed by a dark star. And apparently his grandfather is a super asshole. So, we all know who the super asshole is in this story. So if you can't figure out who his grandfather is at this point, I don't know what to tell you. It's exactly how I felt about while reading it. I was like, they're still pretending like we don't know who this motherfucker is. All right, fine. I will also pretend not to know who this is until it's revealed later. So this lady, I think her name's Mew or May. It's like very standard Chinese name. She's still freaking out about someone, and she's like, and then Leander's like, someone's gonna come explain this whole situation / like, Men in Black eyeball laser thingy to like make her lose her memories. So then Eris and Leander take a few steps away when like people show up, talk about the dark stars. They talk about how like she like directly asks him if, like what her deal was, like why did you save me if I'm like going to become a dark star, and he's like, I don't know, I figured you got like powers and shadow powers, so I was going to like figure it out, and plus the hit wasn't authorized, and not all dark stars become like supernovas or anything, so the fact that someone sent someone after you is kind of like a fucked up thing to do. So So then they have this conversation about her having a choice and how doctors don't have a choice, but she definitely has a choice because they have choices because they're astrals or some bullshit. This is like the 10th time in this book it comes up. I only brought it up like 2 or 3 times, but it's like they keep having like the exact same conversation. It's not very good. Then the cleanup crew finally shows up. The next day, they're back in Astral Academy or whatever, and she's feeling better. She heads over to talk to Poppy and apologize for being an asshole. Poppy doesn't want to hear about it because she was an asshole. So they start training that evening. She still wants the daggers thing comes up again. We're like in episode 63, like 98. And so Leander's finally like, all right, we're like, 2/3 of the way through this series, so the entire series because there's no follow-up book. So I'll allow it. So they practice with them. And then they run into Poppy. Poppy's super pissed. Again, will not forgive Eris at this juncture. At this point, Castor excuses himself so Eris can talk to Poppy. She apologizes a lot, asks for things to go back to the way before. Poppy's like, nah, bitch, and then leaves. Eris goes to train because she's pissed that she was such an asshole and then won't be forgiven for being an asshole. But good for Poppy, honestly. Like, that's some of the best character writing. Like, she's just not just like, okay, you're the bestest. I totally forgive you. Let's be friendsies forever. So she punches things and cries till she's exhausted. Then she tries communicating with Ophiuchus because she's denied Ophiuchus for so long because she was denying her like true self or whatever. He's like not responding. So she cries some more. Then she goes and wakes up Leander in his like super bachelor pad so they can fuck. Just kidding. I was like, oh, they're going to do it now? And it's like, no, Leander is like totally friend zoned. / she has no interest in this teenage girl, which is good for him because she's nuts. So anyway, this is not like your typical like romantasy where this would definitely be a sex scene, but it's not. He just like brings her in, gives her some like hot chocolate. And then she ends up just like sleeping on the couch while, they talk about everything. They talk about Ophiuchus, all that crap. And then he tells her, like, hey, sometimes it happens. And like he reiterates something he already knows, that he had a hard time summoning at first. And that, let's see. I don't know why I wrote, oh, no. Okay, no, then she goes and talks to Castor. Okay, yeah, so she talks to Castor after talking to Leander all night. He talks about how it was hard for him to summon Orion at first, but he got better and better, and that it all became, like, he just communicated with Orion more and talked to him, and the more relationship they had, the easier it was to summon him and whatnot. So she keeps trying to reach out to Ophiuchus. Several days go by. One day she gets an envelope. It's a team summons. She tries to connect with Poppy before she goes out to do like the next quest. Because you never know when you're going to die in one of these things. But Poppy won't answer. So she takes a package. Nylo tells her that, and like drops it off in front of that door. Nylo says it's not going to work. He has issues with her too for some reason. Even though I don't remember her ever being an asshole to him. Just kind of like checking out. They get a mission specifically from the 12. Well, through the 12. And it's to go hunt down like a low-level dark star. So they head out and find a crater in these woods, like the other woods, I guess. There they see some phantoms traveling around. This time there's like a whole bunch of phantoms. And it's like, oh, dark stars and phantoms. And then their car gets like smashed and rolled over because 2 phantoms attack. And then there's just like a wave of phantoms. And this is really where the book like completely deviates from before. Because before it's like these phantoms are like rare creatures and they exist, but they like, exist solo most of the time. And then it's like very, very, very unusual that there were so many of them in this one site. And then now there's just like Night of the Living Dead levels of like zombies / phantoms, and they just when they're fighting them, they're just like, I blow that one up, and then like Leander blew one up, but there were so many, and I'm like, what about their hearts? What about their goddamn hearts book? And it's like, don't you have to figure out? Isn't there like a whole story? Well, that was like the most interesting part of this book. They should have just the Darkstar thing was. I feel like the Darkstar thing really ruined this book. I really should just focus on the phantoms, to be completely honest. I'm not done with this book, but like they spent so much time developing these phantoms as like interesting novel villains. They could have just had like a monster of the week thing where they have to like learn the story of the phantoms and then attack their heart and like beat them and all that stuff. And instead we did this Darkstar thing, and it became like this like not really a romance story either. This book has like, it's like so meandering, and like stuff that comes up, like I said, like the phantom thing is the biggest, most egregious thing, but there's tons of stuff that comes up, relationships, characters, stuff, and it's just like never broached again. Like, or there's stuff that comes up like way at the end. It's like we'll get there, but there's like a thing that comes up right at the end of this like series, and it's like, what the fuck? And it acts like this huge important thing in Eris's life, and it's like, this has literally never come up in like 98 chapters of this fucking like web novel. Like all of a sudden now it's important, and it's like, is it important? Like it's important because there needs to be some reason and some connection to some future story that's not going to ever be written. But anyway, that's literally where I was at with this point. It's like, oh, there's just waves of like, it's like you're playing Call of Duty Zombies in this thing. And they're just like blasting the shit out of phantoms and like moving and like killing more. And there's a huge phantom battle. And it's like the heart thing just like does not matter at a fucking all. Because they're just like blasting away like nothing. And then they get attacked from behind by like a phantom, but then Nikke's there. And so she shows up and she blasts it. And says, what's she doing here? And she's like, oh, I heard about the mission. I just wanted to come for no specific reason. And Leander's like, what's the real reason? And Nikke's like, well, somebody. The Dark Star is an old friend of mine that I grew up with. And that they used to work in the gardens together. And that he came from a family of astrals, where they were astrals because they like disappeared from astral life. And she wants to confirm that he's dead or the family's dead or what's going on. And at that point, Castor finds some tire tracks. So they follow them to this town, and they found a house covered in like garden shit. And so they knock on the door, and a guy dressed like a gardener, and his name's Faulkner, who is Nikke's childhood friend. He opens the door, and Nikke's like, hey, can you just come with us and stuff? And he's like, yeah, okay, sounds good. And then Nikke's about to stab him in the back, and Leander stops her. Why does he stop her? No fucking reason. And all it does is cause problems. So Leander's a real asshole in this situation. Like, this makes no sense. Like, there's a whole thing with Leander where he wants to like forgive and forget and like try to work with the Dark Stars. But in this situation, it's like, hey, how about you let the girl who's like a teacher at this fucking academy do the right thing and like take care of her friend and like let it be, asshole. Like, what are you doing? So he stops her. And he saves her in a humane way. And so the Faulkner just like runs off. And so they give chase and they catch up pretty quick because he's a fat son of a bitch. And he's like begging, and he's talking about how he's controlling his powers, and he's just living alone, and to please leave him alone. And he talks about the Finders, and like, what about the Finders? Like, I didn't hurt them. You know, I didn't hurt them. Something. And it's like, well, we're looking for your parents, and they're needed because we need more astrals because a lot of them are dying. And then he talks about getting harassed for the Finders, and then finally he like ran into the woods, and his power escaped because they had no control over it, right? Because Dark Stars have no control. And then he asks what they're going to do with him. And Leander like walks up and mentions that there's a humane solution back at the academy. And so if he just comes, we can kind of figure it out. And then he starts manifesting his powers and like lightning powers and shadow powers. So now Dark Stars have lightning powers. It's like, like fucking Emperor Palpatine. Like, what is happening? And he starts running, but he's got like lightning speed now or some shit. And then he just keeps getting angrier and more strength, like the fucking Hulk. And then the lightning turns into like black lightning. And then Castor has to save Eris from like the black lightning blast. Nikke finally catches up with Faulkner, and he strikes her, and then eventually he smashes her into like a car. Eris tries calling out to him. Nikke calls out that he's like ascending, which I guess is like turning void or the void blast or the black hole or whatever. And then as Faulkner gets more and more crazy, Leander and Nikke strike but are blocked by shadows, and Ares grabs and breaks the shadows with her abilities. So he strikes at Eris, who lifts her up in the air, and he's strangling her as they both fly away. So he starts talking to Eris. Eris says, you're just like me. You're just like me. You're going to do this too, blah, blah, blah. And then Nikke hears this. She's super confused about the whole situation. Don't worry, though. That could be a very interesting talk back at the school when everyone finds out that she's got shadow powers, but she dies, so don't worry about it. Yep. Not Eris, though. That would be interesting. Nope. Nikke does. So, of course, she does. So she's super confused about the whole situation, and then she realizes she doesn't know about what's going on or any of this stuff. And then she whines. Let's see. And then Eris tears apart his shadows. He's having like a super traumatic reaction to like his childhood and being treated like shit by his parents and locked up because he was born under a dark star. And then Nikke's sneaking up on Faulkner, who launches her away, and then he continues to complain and ascend. And then Castor finally strikes Faulkner hand so that he releases Eris. Then Nikke walks up and tells him that his parents were wrong. Astros don't kill children. He calls out to someone from their past, but she seems super confused about the whole situation. He then blames her for when they were children. Nikke mentioned that there was a light dancing nearby, and this kind of gave his parents, who are astrals, the idea that he was a dark star. And so then they tried to kill him, but the shadow protected him and killed his parents instead, and that's when he ran and hid. So we get some more fighting, fight. Eris is finally able to reach out to Ophiuchus and summon him. So Leo and Ophiuchus start fighting Faulkner. Eris summons fire while Castor increases it with wind. Then like a whole like army of the dead level of phantoms show up. We get more fire wind. Nikke hesitates again instead of just fucking killing Faulkner. And then she gets killed, of course. Thank goodness she died, because otherwise she would tell everybody about Eris being a dark star as well, or having shadow powers, because she's not really a dark star because she has choices, I guess. Jeez. Then Faulkner collapses and all his shadows go away. Eris runs up and holds her hand as Nikke passes, and the shadows envelop everything. Castor asks Eris to control the shadow, and she does. And then it's like time for the null void, but he pulls it all in, which allows Castor and Leander to kill him. Faulkner. That is, he's about to like explode. He's able to like stop the null void, and then they kill him before anything else can happen. After the battle, everyone's dealing with the death of Nikke differently. They head back to town. Then Eris starts talking about saving the other Dark Stars, and how it was the Astrals that found Faulkner, so it's their fault. That he went into a null void, because if they just left him alone, he supposedly would have been fine. But that's not what we know at all, so I don't know why she would think that, just because she felt that way and because feelings matter or something. Feelings are her truth. Anyway, so Castor starts getting into it with her and about how you can't save everyone. And then he reveals that his parents were killed by a Dark Star, which I could have sworn is something we learned multiple times in this story. And that none of this is new information. Anyway, they argue about Dark Stars and about losing humanity. And then they get picked up by a farmer. And they start talking about his grandfather, who's very traditional, the society's most important thing. And it's like, what about her family? She's like, never knew any of them. Foster home until she aged out. Now she's found her family, which is Leander. Literally, Leander, probably. Anyway, so then the Nikkes have this funeral. It's this huge affair. Everyone wears black. They light candles. There's like a lot of repetition. It's like being at a Catholic mass funeral where the priest says stuff and you just repeat it back. They pick up Nikke's body and they take her down to like the lowest level of the place so they can bury her. Afterwards, Castor is arguing with Apollo about something. Eris hears a little bit of their conversation. She interrupts it, pretending that she's lost and needs help. She thinks about the conversation that they had and then goes to the Nikke's garden to start working on it. One of the finders there, it's her friend. So it's not Kelly. There's like a guy friend that she met when she went to the commissary to eat lunch with him one time. And he was always super nice to her. And so they start hanging out and doing gardening stuff together. And they're just chatting about her like ignoring people, what she can do to make it up to her friends. They talk about the funeral, how finders' funerals are like no ceremony whatsoever because the Astros are like a whole different class. And there's classism in this story. Which I guess there always was. They just get sent back to their families. She asks about the Hastings Dark Stars. He mentions about hating Dark Stars. And he's like, no, I feel bad for them. I don't hate for them. I pity them. Because they can't control themselves. That's right, control. It's all about control. He mentions Leander is on a solo mission, and she gets very concerned about this. So she heads to Leander's room and confronts him, and he invites her inside, gives her tea, doesn't try to fuck her or anything, because this isn't a real... There's nothing going on in this story. Literally nothing. So he mentions that he doesn't trust the person who came up with the mission, which is obviously the grandfather of Leander, who's obviously Apollo at this point. We're going to get like the facts on that pretty soon, so I might as well just rip the Band-Aid off since if you haven't figured it out by now, I don't know what to do for you. Anyway, and they talk about how it's like extremely strange to go solo when you have a team. That doesn't make any sense, but he like refuses to comment and tells her not to worry about it. By her door, she finds a note. It's from Poppy, clearly. It's a watercolor drawing of Eris. And if you remember all the way back at the very beginning of this book, which has never come up since that point, or this web series, that this would have been like 2 years later when you read the story, if you're reading it live, that she liked to draw watercolors. And it has, so it's like, okay, I guess it's a callback to something that happened in this book, but like it really doesn't seem like it was just like, oh, it's a watercolor drawing. I knew it was Poppy. And you're like, oh yeah. I mean, I did listen to this whole thing in like a flight, so I do remember that, but I can only imagine like reading this over years and being like, I guess she has water magic. Like, why would I remember that? Anyway, the next morning she heads to the gym. It's time for some gains. Castor's there because the gym is actually his room. Because he's always in the fucking gym. Like, always. He challenges her to a duel. They duel. He starts blushing after spending time with Eris. And so finally he's like letting his guard down and falling in love or whatever. She's also blushing a bit. And they go off to see Leander off. Later on, Eris starts spending more time in Nikke's garden with the Finder boy. And he's pretty good. He's like way better at gardening than she is. And they work on one flower specifically for Nikke. And then one day Castor comes to get her to come to some ceremony with the Astrals who've returned from some mission. And it's clearly like a date. Then as they're walking, they hear phantoms in the Astral Academy. Oh no! Also, there's explosions. So they rush off to the atrium, and there's an army of phantoms that are pushing in through a blown out wall. She's about to go help when she sees Nilo, and he's knocked out. Then the phantoms get to him, and so they run over to help him. As they get closer, the exit to another wall cracks open, and they're surrounded now. Castor kind of confesses his love to Ares, since they think they're going to die. Right as 3 phantoms are about to hit them, and Nilo, who's woken up and creates a shield. Then Nilo mentions that there's space below for them to flee, because apparently that's something he can sense. Cool. So Ares uses her water bending combined with Castor's wind bending into making some sort of drill mechanism, and with that they break down to the hallway right before Nilo passes out. So now that they got out of the danger zone, it's time to rush Nilo over to the clinic so that he can get some help. So they rush away. They run into some spider phantoms, like a whole bunch of them. She uses shadow magic to stop them, and then they are able to get to the hospital. They drop Nilo off, and then they head back out to fight the phantoms. They find that the atrium area where like the attack initially started is like a complete war zone. All the 12 are there. They're just like blasting phantoms like it's no big deal. They don't have to find hearts or shit or anything because it doesn't really matter apparently. And then the whole thing... Okay. And then she also sees Poppy fighting, and then Poppy gets bit. And so she has Castor send her over there with Wind, and they bicker while they're fighting. It's like completely ridiculous, but whatever. Bitches be crazy and whatnot. But they eventually make up while they're fighting, and they're both just like killing phantoms ad nauseum with like whatever, no hearts, no matter. She's just like, here's Water Blast, you're dead. Here's Fire Blast, you're dead. Whatever, who cares? Fuck this. And then they get blasted, turn to goo, whatever. Castor then gets caught up by one of the phantoms, and he gets smashed into the ground and knocked out. Apollo sees this and runs up to him, as well as Eris. Eris sees this and notices that Apollo is not going fast enough to save him, so she freaks out, and Ophiuchus reaches out to comfort her, and at this point she's like, I gotta do this. So she does some shadow bending and saves him and destroys all the phantoms, because hearts don't matter, in the whole place. And then Castor calls out to her, which causes her to stop destroying all the phantoms with her shadow bending. Castor then comes up to her, and she's about to pass out because she used like all her mana or whatever. They flirt a little bit, and then everyone's like talking or whatever, and the old lady 12 is like silence everybody, and then she gets in an argument with Apollo because there's a procedure, but Apollo is feeding into everyone's fears that like, hey, we have a dark star, we have to kill it like immediately, and the old lady's like, no, there's a procedure for handling this. She says something about the stars give the law or something, and they can't ignore the law or whatever. Never comes up again because the story's almost over and never got a sequel. So then a couple of randos come and take her down to the catacombs to lock her up in some sort of like dungeon for like the procedure. Anyway, she wakes up at that a little bit later and realizes where she is, and she's like, I gotta break out of here, they're gonna fucking kill me or something. And then Leander shows up, knocks out the guards, breaks her out, and she asks about the phantoms, and he's like, yo bro, you killed most of them, there are a few left, but we took care of them easily because phantoms are super easy to kill, they're just like fucking zerglings. Anyway, so they talk about how the phantom attack clearly was an inside job, and then they say some shady stuff about taking care of like family and stuff. And clearly Leander's supposed to be like her brother or something, or whatever. So they're supposed to be related. Like, it's very obvious that this is how this is being written. It never gets resolved to anywhere, but it's like the writing is clearly set up to go in that direction. So we're just gonna assume he's like a brother or father or something. Anyway, most likely a brother because he's supposed to be in his like mid-30s. So I guess he could be the father, but probably not likely. Anyway, so they split up so Leander can get some more information because he still has. He's gonna escape with her and they're gonna leave and try to figure out this Dark Star thing and the connection and whatnot and all sorts of like interesting stuff all the way in chapter like 93 of this story that has no resolution in any of this stuff. But he's going to use his clearance before he bounces out. And yeah, he literally says clearance. Like, this person doesn't know how to like write English sometimes. It's kind of funny. Anyway, they split up so Leander can go get that information, and then Eris loots some corpses, which is hot, I guess. And then so she doesn't have to look like like a prisoner or something. She sneaks away, and then she's like, I gotta go get stuff from my room. So she heads to her room. And as she walks in, she gets strangled. There's some like random old man just like hiding out there. He's like, I knew you would come back here. And it's like, how the fuck? Stupid. It's really going off the rails at this point. So she pulls him off from shadows and knocks him out. And then she packs up her stuff. And as soon as she walks to the door, she runs into Nilo and Poppy. And this is where the audiobook ends. Like, she opens the door and it's like Nilo and Poppy. And it's not like dun dun dun. It's just like, that's the end of the story. And it's like, that's not the end of the story. So then I had to track down fucking the web novel because I was like, this clearly keeps going, and this audiobook is like, I found it on like Amazon, and that was like it. So I don't know how it even ended up in this like batch of light novels that I got off like a torrent website. So then as soon as she opens the door, Nilo draws his knife or a dagger or something, because throughout the whole story, he has like a knife or a dagger. Like, the words keep changing because, words don't mean anything, and it's just like he has some sort of like short blade. And literally in this chapter, it says he pulls his knife out, and later on, he's threatening me with his dagger. I'm like, does he have two weapons or just one? Like, those are different things. Anyway, he goes to cut her throat despite the pleading from Eris and from Poppy, and so Poppy knocks him out with a lamp. And then Poppy's like, I love you, I don't care, blah, blah, blah. And they like hug it out. Next up, she goes to Castor because Eris is a teenage girl and logic and reasoning have gone completely out of her fucking brain. So she's able to like sneak into his room, and when We then get some confusing information. Apparently, his family had been killed by dark stars under Ophiuchus or had been killing dark stars under Ophiuchus for generations until Eris. So they showed up. So his parents killed her parents, but they didn't kill her for like some unknown reason. And then it's implied that the dark star that killed his parents is the same one. Wait, anyway, and hung them up in the atrium. Yeah, it's like it's almost implied that Eris killed them and hung them up in the atrium because she was a baby or something. Like it's heavily implied that she did it, and it's like how, but it's not explained or anything. Either way, he pulls out his sword and he's like, "I won't let you change. I love you too much." And he's very sloppily swinging the sword at her, and then he drops it and kisses her, of course, and they both confess their feelings. And he reveals the most obvious thing in the entire book, as I've hinted at like 1,000 different times, that Apollo is his grandfather, and that it was him who sent Castor to kill her. She begs for him to come with her. He can't because dark stars and such. So they kiss again, and then she leaves. And so finally, the final chapter of the web novel that will never be completed, she finally works her way over to the garage without any more problems. There, Leander's been waiting, and he's like, "Jesus Christ, Eris, I gotta get the fuck out of here." And she's like, "I know, I'm a teenage girl." And then Leander reveals information that he found changes everything. We don't find out what that information is. He just says, "The stuff I found out changes everything." And then for some reason, she feels very comforted because this information that even she doesn't know is going to help them save the Dark Stars. And that's the end. So there you go. That's Constellations. I would not recommend reading this book. It's all over the place. It's fine. The writing's fine, except the story doesn't make any sense. Stuff changes in the lore, like just periodically. Like this person clearly didn't keep track of their own lore, which is like, okay, good enough. I mean, they made like an audiobook somehow. They got someone to pay for that, and then they sold it on Amazon, so they clearly made some money off of it. And then there's like the web novel, which is completely unfinished. And there's some like decent ideas in this story, but it's just like it was not held together well. It really has the Twilight issue, where if you've read Twilight, you're like, this needed like an editor or two to like be good. Like it's fine, and like the general story and the world that Stephanie Meyer created for Twilight is actually kind of interesting, and all the stuff with like the Civil War ghosts, or I mean vampires, is actually super interesting and fun. But we needed more of that, and less of just like Renesmee, or to the fuck that like vampire child's name who's in love with like a werewolf who like attaches to her, because that's not creepy at all. You crazy bitches, man. Anyway, yeah, so Constellations, not worth it. Not very good. It's an interesting premise with some interesting ideas that is just not put together and could severely use an editor. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later.